Have you ever noticed that the smarter you get in your native language, the dumber you feel when you're trying to operate in a new one?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very real thing.
Right. It's this incredibly frustrating paradox. You have, decades of life experience, you've got a nuanced understanding of the world, and highly complex ambitions.
Yeah, you're an adult with adult thoughts.
Exactly. But then you put yourself in a situation where you have to articulate those sophisticated thoughts in a language you're, still mastering.
And suddenly you're struggling to say anything beyond, like, what you had for breakfast.
Yes. You just completely freeze up. Today, we are dissecting a phenomenon known as the ambition freeze. It's that exact neurological moment where your vocabulary basically betrays your intellect.
Which is such a great way to put it.
And we're going to explore this through a really fascinating case study found in our source material today. It's an excerpt titled The Grammar of Ambition, Expressing Future Plans with Confidence.
Right, and the case study focuses on a language learner named Liam. But the psychological mechanisms at play here, they really apply to anyone who has ever choked under the pressure of trying to sound smart.
Oh, totally. We've all been there.
Yeah, I mean, when someone asks a sprawling, open-ended question like, what are your plans for the future, they aren't just making small talk,
Not at all.
They are essentially demanding that you synthesize your entire life's trajectory, your values, your professional goals, all on the spot.
Which is hard enough to do in your native tongue.
Exactly. Doing that in your native language is tough. But doing it while simultaneously juggling the mechanics of a second language, it triggers a very specific kind of cognitive overload.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to start by looking at Liam's specific predicament.
Right.
The source material paints a picture of a guy who has actually put in the work. I mean, he's not a beginner.
No, he's quite advanced in some areas.
Yeah, he reads English at a high level. He listens to podcasts. His passive understanding is excellent. But there is this massive disconnect between his input and his output.
A huge gap.
Right. When that dreaded question about the future comes up, he doesn't just stumble. He completely halts. He actually talks about this internal monologue where he's thinking to himself, I want to answer, but I just don't know how.
Yeah, and that gap between passive comprehension and active generation, that's actually one of the most heavily researched areas in linguistics and cognitive psychology.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. What Liam is experiencing, it isn't a lack of vocabulary. It's actually a failure of working memory under stress.
So his brain is basically just getting overwhelmed.
Precisely. See, when we read or listen, our brain is in pattern recognition mode. It relies really heavily on context clues, so it requires relatively low cognitive effort.
You're just absorbing.
Right. But active speech generation, especially when we're talking about abstract concepts like the future, it requires us to do so many things at once.
Like?
Well, we have to retrieve vocabulary, conjugate verbs, apply syntax rules, and monitor the social reactions of our listener all at the exact same time.
It makes me think of, how a computer's RAM works.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, Liam's brain is just a browser with way too many tabs open. He has one tab open for the complex, abstract vision of his career.
Right.
And then another tab is frantically searching for the correct modal verbs to express a hypothetical future.
Yes, exactly.
Then a third tab is running a spell check on his pronunciation. And a fourth tab is monitoring the facial expressions of the person he's talking to, scanning for judgment.
And eventually the RAM just completely maxes out.
The system crashes, the screen freezes.
Yeah.
It's like he has this beautifully furnished house, but the front door is completely jammed.
Mm-hmm.
All this data, these rich, beautiful ambitions, they're inside his head. But the processing power required to export them in real time is just overloaded. The mechanism is broken.
What's fascinating here is the biological cascade that follows that system crash.
The biological cascade.
Yeah. When the cognitive load exceeds your working memory's capacity, the brain actually interprets that failure as a threat.
Wow, really? A threat?
Yes. The amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, and you experience what linguist Stephen Krashen famously called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Right. It's this invisible neurological wall that just shoots up and completely blocks language production.
Oh, wow.
And the irony is that Liam actually knows the words he needs. The data is on the hard drive, so to speak.
But the door is jammed.
Exactly. The stress of trying to formulate the absolute perfect, most sophisticated response has completely severed his access to the vocabulary.
So he's trapped.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this mentor character in the source material named Olivia.
Yes, Olivia is key here.
She steps in and does something really crucial before she even teaches him a single word.
Yeah.
She normalizes the freeze.
That is such an important step.
Yeah, she tells him that feeling stuck isn't a symptom of poor language skills.
Yeah.
It's a totally standard reaction to cognitive overload.
Right.
And just that validation alone seems to act as this, like, pressure release valve for him.
Absolutely. It brings the cortisol back down.
But her actual practical solution is what I found so intriguing and honestly a bit counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, she doesn't give him advanced vocabulary to match his adult ambitions. She actually prescribes absolute structural simplicity.
She does?
The source lists the exact menu of phrases she gives him. It's things like, I'm planning to, I want to, I hope to, I'm going to, and in the future, I would like to.
Yeah, she is essentially telling him to reboot his brain in safe mode. By providing him with these highly functional, really rigid structures, she is artificially constraining his options.
See, I have to push back on this approach, though.
Okay, why?
Put yourself in the shoes of an adult professional.
Yeah.
If you have complex, mature ambitions, like maybe you're trying to launch a tech startup or you're pivoting your entire career to a new industry, starting a sentence with, I want to, feels incredibly reductive.
I can see that.
It almost borders on infantile, right? Like if the goal is to project confidence and articulate a sophisticated vision for the future, doesn't resorting to the language of a toddler completely undermine you?
Well, it feels reductive only if we conflate the complexity of our grammar with the complexity of our ideas.
Say more about that.
This is a massive trap for adult learners. Adults inherently want to sound like adults.
Right.
We are so used to commanding respect through our nuance and our expansive vocabulary. So when we are forced to use basic syntax, our ego just rebels. We feel stupid.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Olivia's core rule in the text confronts this ego directly. Her mandate to Liam is very clear. She says, you don't need complicated grammar, just start simple and then add more details.
So she's arguing that the maturity of the thought will actually shine through, regardless of the grammatical vehicle carrying it.
Exactly, and she proves it with a specific example. She models a sentence for Liam. She says, I'm planning to improve my English next year because I want better opportunities.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. Let's dissect the mechanics of that sentence. From a syntactic standpoint, I'm planning to and I want, those are foundational. A 5-year-old uses those exact structures to ask for a toy.
Right.
But a 5-year-old does not possess the semantic concept of long-term language acquisition for the purpose of career advancement.
Yeah.
By separating the cognitive load of the syntax from the cognitive load of the semantics, Olivia solves the RAM problem.
That's brilliant.
You use a pre-packaged, zero-effort grammatical structure so that you can dedicate 100% of your brain's processing power to the complexity of your actual idea.
Yeah,
You are removing the friction of the how so you can actually deliver the what.
exactly.
If you don't have to beat your vehicle from scratch every single time you speak, you can focus on where you're driving. That completely shifts how we view these basic phrases. They aren't training wheels. They are highly efficient delivery systems. And this transition from theory to execution is where the narrative really gains its traction. Because having a streamlined framework is useless if your basal ganglia, the part of the brain responsible for habit formation and automaticity, if that part hasn't been trained to use the framework under pressure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material details the actual mechanics of Liam's evening practice routine.
Yes, his routine is fascinating.
He goes home, alone in his room, and he speaks out loud. But he doesn't just read paragraphs. He builds them.
Right, systematically.
Yeah. He starts with a base structure, saying out loud, I want to improve my English. Then the text notes, he pauses. That pause is the key.
Yes, it is.
After he pauses, he stacks the motivation onto the base, because I want to travel. And over the course of several days, he leverages this stacking method to create increasingly complex thoughts. Like, in the future, I would like to travel to different countries and speak English with people.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this stacking method is a brilliant application of cognitive scaffolding.
Cognitive scaffolding.
Yeah. Instead of trying to generate a massive, multifaceted paragraph in one huge burst of mental effort, he is relying on algorithmic compounding.
It really makes me think of building with Lego blocks. And I don't mean that in a superficial child's play kind of way, but in terms of structural integrity.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't grab 50 scattered pieces and try to assemble a complete roof in midair. It would just shatter in your hands.
Right.
You start with one solid, immovable base block. For Liam, that block is the chunked phrase. It's a closed-loop neural pathway. He snaps it down onto the table. It is secure.
Yes.
It requires absolutely zero working memory to maintain. And once that block is locked in, his brain is completely free to search for the next logical piece, the because block.
Exactly.
By snapping these discrete, easily manageable subroutines together, he is engineering a complex sentence without ever overloading his cognitive capacity.
And that neurological scaffolding is exactly what prevents the freeze, because he never asks his brain to hold more than one block at a time. The text also highlights the specific environmental conditions he uses to cement this habit. He writes his goals down, reinforcing the neural pathways through a multimodal approach. But most importantly, he speaks out loud, alone.
Now, why is this solitude so critical to the mechanism?
Yeah.
I mean, if the goal is to speak to other people, shouldn't he practice with other people?
Well, practicing with other people reintroduces the very variable that causes the crash in the first place, the social evaluation threat.
Oh, right, the judgment.
Exactly. When you are alone, the affective filter drops to zero. There is no ego to protect. There's no listener whose microexpressions might trigger an anxiety spike.
So it's totally safe.
Yeah. By practicing the physical, motor articulatory mechanics of speech in a zero-stakes environment, Liam achieves automaticity. His mouth gets used to forming the words while his brain gets used to connecting the concepts. And the source describes the outcome of this perfectly. It says his thoughts become clearer and his sentences become smoother.
I really want to highlight that exact phrasing from the text. It doesn't just say his pronunciation improved or like his vocabulary grew. It says his thoughts became clearer.
Yes.
The act of forcing his sprawling, abstract ambitions into these rigid structural blocks actually organized the chaotic mess inside his own head.
Which is a profound realization about the nature of language itself, really. We tend to view language merely as a broadcasting tool.
Like a radio tower.
Exactly, just a way to transmit a fully formed thought from my brain to yours. But cognitive linguists argue that language is actually a constitutive tool.
Constitutive, so it builds things.
Right. It is the very mechanism we use to structure and refine our own thinking. By artificially restricting himself to simple syntax, Liam was forced to distill his sprawling ambitions down to their absolute essence.
And that distillation leads us right to the climax of the case study. Because Liam has been practicing in a vacuum. He has built the neural pathways, he's stacked his blocks until the subroutines are fully automatic.
He's put in the reps.
Yeah. And then the inevitable happens. He is out in the real world, and someone asks him the exact question that triggered the system crash in the beginning of our deep dive. What are your plans for the future?
The ultimate test of the working memory under social pressure.
Exactly. But this time, the text tells us the freeze doesn't happen. The working memory doesn't overload. He doesn't panic.
Right.
His voice is calm, and his message is immediately clear. Let me actually read the exact response he delivers straight from the source.
Yeah.
He says, I'm planning to improve my English and travel in the future because I want to experience new cultures.
It is a total triumph of cognitive management.
Totally.
I mean, the sentence itself is mechanically flawless, but more importantly, it is deeply communicative. He seamlessly links his immediate action, improving his English, with a midterm goal, traveling.
Right.
And then he anchors them both to a profound underlying value, which is experiencing new cultures. And he does it all using the foundational Lego blocks he practiced in his room.
So what does this all mean when we look at this complete transformation from Liam experiencing total linguistic paralysis, to delivering this incredibly grounded, confident declaration? I have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you think the turning point was the structural framework itself? Like, was it the specific menu of phrases Olivia provided? Or was it the psychological shift of granting himself permission to drop the facade of the native-speaking poet?
Oh, the specific phrases were merely the catalyst. The true turning point was absolutely the psychological shift. Yeah. I mean, the vocabulary Liam utilized words like planning, travel, and because those were already in his mental database long before the story began.
That's true.
What he lacked was the permission to use them without shame. The core insight we can extract from this material is that communicating your future, whether in a second language or your native tongue, is never about syntactic perfection. It is entirely about clarity of intent.
Clarity of intent over perfection.
Exactly. When Liam abandoned the adult ego's demand for complex grammar, he bypassed the neurological bottleneck that was suffocating his expression. The actionable blueprint here is undeniable. Anchor your thoughts in simplicity, systematically stack your details, and practice until the pathway becomes automatic.
It really requires you to be brave enough to sound simple. Like, if you can let go of the need to impress people with your linguistic gymnastics, you actually give yourself the bandwidth to impress them with your ideas.
Well said.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the universal dread of the ambition freeze, dissecting how the pressure to summarize our complex lives just overloads our working memory and crashes the system.
And we examined how applying structural simplicity acts as a cognitive safe mode, separating the heavy lifting of grammar from the heavy lifting of abstract thought.
Right. And we broke down the mechanics of the stacking method. Using those sturdy linguistic Lego blocks to create complex algorithmic subroutines in a low-stakes environment, allowing the brain to finally achieve automaticity. Ultimately, we saw how abandoning the ego of perfection unlocks genuine, unhesitating confidence. I want to leave you with the final direct plea from our source material today.
It's a great takeaway.
It states, if someone asks you about your future, don't stay silent. Speak, even if your sentences are incredibly simple, because every single sentence you form bridges the gap between passive understanding and active confidence. You don't need to construct a massive, complex architecture vocabulary on the spot. You just need to lay down one solid block and then another.
It is a highly practical framework for communication, but as we step back and look at the broader implications of this deep dive, I think there is a hidden layer here that extends far beyond language learning.
Oh yeah, what do you mean?
Well, we have spent this entire conversation analyzing how simple sentences help us project our ambitions outward, allowing others to finally understand our goals. But perhaps the true power of this constraint is internal. Yeah, by stripping away our own mental clutter, by forcing our sprawling, overwhelming, often terrifying dreams into basic, manageable structures like I want to and because, it forces us to clarify what we actually desire.
Wow.
So I leave you with this to ponder. If speaking our goals aloud in the simplest terms possible is what finally brings us the confidence to share them, could it be that the very act of simplifying our ambitions is exactly what makes them achievable?